Well, as we do every Friday morning, it's time for another episode of the About Mansfield Consumer Advice Series. I'm Steve Casillo. Appreciate you being here today. And as we do every Friday, I got a little bounce there going because I'm standing up today. It's something I don't do very often, but I do it because over there on the other side of the studio, Phillip Washington Jr. loves to do his episode standing up. So we're doing our bit today, our 10-minute nugget of information. Standing up.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome to the studio again. By the way, you learned something very very educational today about the months, that we would actually be in the 10th month right now if it wasn't for the Romans.
Yeah, you enlightened me to that error of judgment on the parts of the Romans.
That's right. So
I guess my son would be, and now I'm super confused because my boys are like in these new phantom months. I don't know when they would actually be born.
We were talking about, for the benefit of the listeners and viewers, that originally there were only 10 months of the year, where September, October, November, December were 7, 8, 9, and 10. If you know the Latin language of DEC, D-E-C, means 10. And December is now the 12th month because they added July and August in honor of Julius Caesar and Augustus. And somehow now the 10th month is now the 12th month. And so and I was saying that you know they could have just added it to the end of the year, and we could enjoy summer in the 11th and 12th month.
That would have been awesome.
But
would have been awesome.
What were the Romans thinking?
What were they thinking?
So today we're talking about 2022 investment recap. A lot went on in 2022.
A lot went on in 2022. It was it was an adjustment period. You know, the S&P, and these are rough numbers as of yesterday, was down about 15%. Bonds were down roughly about the same. The S&P was down about 27%. Bitcoin was down 55%, and oil was the only really thing that was up, and it was up about 16%. So it was and that kind of year is what you would call like a stagflation year, right? Slow growth, high inflation, which is, representative of the 70s in the context if you want to get a period of time where that was another similar long period. That was this year.
All right, so a lot of these are down. You mentioned the S&P, NASDAQ bonds, and Bitcoin are down. A friend of mine who's really into investing would tell me that's an investment year, though, that everything has gone on sale. Is that
it's funny you say that, because I actually was having a conversation with clients that were relatively young but risk averse, and they asked, hey, should we, stop our contributions? Like, what should we do? And I was like, I say, well, before this year, I was really only super bullish about, Bitcoin and maybe the stocks in the ARKW or ARKK ETF. Those were really the only thing I was optimistic about, because they are the future and they had so much growth potential that even the prices that they were at were still, I think, relatively attractive. However, after this year, everything, S&P stocks look attractive. NASDAQ stocks look attractive. Even bonds are relatively attractive because of the high interest rates that they're paying relative to global growth.
Right.
And so everything at this moment right now looks extremely attractive, and it's from my perspective, a great time to buy.
And you mentioned on your podcast, and we've mentioned this before, that you do your podcast, Wealth Building Made Simple, just minutes before we go on the air here and talk about basically the same thing. So you had mentioned on your podcast earlier today the different parts of the world of how the S&P and NASDAQ, what they represent. Help me out with that.
Yeah, so and I even have a better way of saying it even on this podcast. I'm glad we talk about it. So you can the indexes all represent different generations economies. So you could think of like the Dow, right? The reason why all of my boomer clients always reference the Dow is the Dow was the economy when in their minds, when they came into the investment world, that was the economy. So if you look at the Dow stocks, it's going to be AT&T, right? The stocks within the Dow have changed over time, but you could think of Dow like old world, right? Pre S&P 500.
It's exactly what I was going to say is old money.
Yeah, and then you look at the S&P, which is representative of the current world that we're in. That's really dying, right? Nasdaq, which began being a benchmark that we paid attention to maybe 20 years ago. That's the economy of like Gen X, right? The tech, VC billionaires that are building the newer world, and now you have Bitcoin, which is why I use it as a reference, which is the world of the generation that's even like millennials and Gen Z, right? Because like that's, if you talk to anybody who's a teenager, 20, or a tech savvy millennial, right? It's no big deal to own digital currency, right? Like it's not even a debate.
Yeah.
It's just, that's a foregone conclusion, and the uses of it is already well understood. Now, who's going to be the winner and loser, right? That requires wisdom, because I talked previously before about, I talk a lot about optimism, positive perspective. Money follows optimism and positive perspective, and it does. But what makes you a good investor, because the reason why you'll have somebody like Sam Friedman, the guy that was behind FTX, or the Theranos lady, and all these people that are, operating in the future, the reason why they can swindle so many people is because like money cannot help but be attracted to optimism. But in order to not be foolish, you have to pair the optimism with wisdom, right? And wisdom in the context of like time-tested principles, not just experience, right? Because like experience, there's people who are 70 years old and they've been repeating the last 50 years over and over and over again, right? They never matured out of their 20s. And so what I'm saying is like maturity based on principles, then you marry that with an open, optimistic mind, and that's when you get real clear, right? And you do the work of just listening to a good podcast like Wealth Building Made Simple that told you last year and multiple times how to keep your crypto and or how to really specifically invest really only in Bitcoin and keep your Bitcoin secure, right? But the information's out there. It's just a matter of like pairing the two, right? Marrying experience with youthful optimism, which is the yin and yang that operates the universe.
Yeah, and you mentioned, so all of these indexes are down, the S&P, the NASDAQ, the bonds, even Bitcoin. What would happen, hypothetically, if all of these went down to zero?
Everything?
Everything.
Yeah, the world restarts, and then we'll figure something else out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like you just said, like we literally like lived through a period of time where they changed the calendars of the month, right? And we world-shaking events are a norm throughout history for humans, but we continue to evolve and figure it out. Well, I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm like if it does happen, I'm like, oh, great, even more uncertainty. Because here's the point I really want to make. Like once you become pro-human beings,
yeah,
and you believe in our ability to like never die as a species, like to continue to evolve, then you realize there's literally no situation that we can't evolve through. Like none, like zero. No situation that we can't evolve through, and we will evolve through. And if you maintain that perspective, then you will, in any situation, always attract all the resources and everything you need, regardless of your conditions.
Can we gaze into the crystal ball for a second?
Yes, sir.
All right. So 2022, we saw all these indexes down. Let's look into the crystal ball. What do you see for 2023?
I see more uncertainty.
More uncertainty. And why do you say that?
Yeah, because the future is always uncertain, right? Seriously, I don't have the ability to know personally what's going to happen in a year from now, 2 years from now, right? I feel like a positive perspective married with experience, you just know that it works out, right? And so I feel good about saying I'm going to be positioned properly based on the future, and then things will work out in its own perfect time. That doesn't mean like 50 years, right? It very likely means, I feel highly confident 5 to 10 years, like I'm super happy with this conversation. Maybe sooner, right? From a statistical standpoint, next year should be great. Like if you look at straight stats, right? But I don't, I'm moving away from straight stats because there's a book called Stats Lie, right? So, the stat says, anyway, I don't want to go there.
Nah, let's not go there.
Yeah.
I tell you what, let's go ahead and do the recap, and then we'll get into contact information. So in the 60 seconds or so that we have left, do you want to recap investments of 2022?
Yep. Investments, the investment environment made prices very attractive for 2023. The future is great. Those who lean into the asset classes that are most in harmony with the future will, from my perspective, be very, very happy in 5 to 10 years from now. So be optimistic, use wisdom and wise experience, and hope for the best, because really, like, what's the alternative?
Using wisdom, the financial philosopher, Phillip Washington Jr. If someone wanted to reach out to you and find out about their 2022 investment recap, or maybe even talks about the months of the year, how do they get a hold of Phillip Washington Jr.?
Best way is stonehillwealthmanagement.com. That's stonehillwealthmanagement.com. Thanks for having me, Steve.
That's another 10-minute nugget of information. We do this every Friday. Phillip, we do this, like I said, every week. Let's do it again next week.
Thanks.